There are over 1 million dogs in London, each with over 300 olfactory receptors in their nose. Their sense of smell is so good that they could smell the strawberries and cream of Wimbledon while standing in the Olympic Park. Their incredible sense of smell already helps humans in a number of ways, but today they're helping scientists to develop novel methods of detecting disease. Just like the dogs we've been working with to develop a way to detect Pseudomonas bacteria from the lungs of people with cystic fibrosis. My name's John King. I am a paediatrician in training, but also currently undertaking a research role with Imperial College London. And my MD is mainly focused around the rapid detection of a bacteria called Pseudomonas and how we can identify it in people with cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis is an inherited condition where a patient who has it has to have two affected genes causing CF. The affected genes lead to a problem with production of a certain type of protein in the body, and if that protein is not made properly, then it leads to the lining of various organs in the body becoming dehydrated. And in the lungs, the impact of that is that it leads to lots of very thick, sticky mucus production, and sticky, thick mucus is the perfect environment for bacteria to live in. If we don't find that bacteria, then it will lead to scarring and lung damage over time. So it's important that we are able to find out what bacteria are in the lung. That usually comes with sputum samples, but in young children, sputum samples don't come easily. Cough swabs aren't very reliable, and the other tests we've got are reasonably invasive or not very pleasant to do. So moving on from that, part of my MD project and what my research is about here, and what Jane, as the lead of the lab, has been looking to do, is to come up with new strategies for rapid Pseudomonas detection, non-invasive detection. And one of those themes includes the medical detection dogs.
Wait. Prucam! Good girl. Good girl. My name is Steve Jackson, and I'm one of the biodetection trainers at Medical Detection Dogs. So training dogs for Pseudomonas is quite complicated. If you think of dog training in general terms, you might teach the dog to respond to a command. You might be teaching them how to return to you when called, or walking nicely on the lead. And that always involves the dog being able to rely on you as a handler and as a trainer to give them the answer. Whereas working on a Pseudomonas project, we're having to trust the dogs to tell us which sample has Pseudomonas bacteria in, and which sample might have a different, very similar bacteria. So we have to trust that the dogs can do it a lot better than us.
Ultimately, training the dogs and using the dogs will be a really good tool for screening lots of samples in one go.
Woo. Let's go! My pal! Yeah! Ready.
To humans, Pseudomonas grown in a lab has quite a distinctive smell or odour, but we can't smell it at low concentrations. But presented to the dogs, and we've shown that could have good levels of sensitivity and specificity, so making sure that they get the right bacteria and they do it at low quantity, then that single step will help identify which patients then probably need to go on to have a more invasive test.
Medical Detection Dogs has got about 150 dogs working now. So we have our biodetection dogs that are trained to detect the odour of disease from a sample that's collected. So they'd never go near to the person, but what they would do is have a collected sample that comes into them in their working environment, and they're trained to detect disease off this small sample. I've got 4 dogs in here today. Okay. And this is Iggy. This is Tala. This is Asher. Asher is a rescue Cocker Spaniel. We don't know his exact age. He had 7 homes before he came to us. So I'm Claire Guest, and I'm Chief Executive and Chief Medical Officer of the charity Medical Detection Dogs, and I'm also very proud to be a co-founder of the charity in 2008. You know, we've had dogs working in drugs and explosives for many years, and people recognise that, you know, they can make keep us safe by this detection. But when you move into the world of diagnostics, there's still a scepticism. You know, how could a dog possibly help in human medicine? And actually, it takes people with incredible open minds of Jane and John to see the value and see where dogs can fit in. It's not that the dog becomes the doctor, even though some media headlines might like to make that the case, but it's not that. The dogs are assisting with what they know.
So this is what we've come up with, which for now we're calling a huff tube. It's a rather low-tech piece of kit, essentially. They would place their lips around the cardboard end and breathe into that with one big breath. And then the idea is that they would then take the lid off the pot. We get them to open up the poking stick, which is a technical science term, and carefully just poke through the top end until the gauze falls out in the pot. Close the lid, give it a swirl until it's all wet, and then it gets packaged up safely for postage back to us before sending it off to the dogs.
I'd send the dog to search each sample in turn, and the dog would then tell me whether it's a control sample or a target sample. And then when the dog's given me their answer, I can then give that information to our data assistant, who then tells me whether the dog is right or wrong. If the dog's right, they can be rewarded, and if the dog is wrong, it gives us an opportunity to train the dog on that sample again in order to make sure that they're understanding why they were wrong on that particular sample. Prue here is, she's a lovely dog. She's very stubborn, which is great. Actually helps her when she's actually searching down the stands, because she's got that fierce independence which makes her a fantastic detection dog.
I'm Jade, I'm 26 and I live with cystic fibrosis. My experience with Pseudomonas is it was pretty much one of the first infections that I caught when I was a child, and eventually I had to take a nebulized antibiotic kind of full time every single day, and that was quite devastating at that age, to be perfectly honest. I'd say giving a huff sample would be much more convenient and much less uncomfortable than a cough swab or an induced sputum sample, a lot quicker as well, a lot easier. Yeah, so I heard about John's research through the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. I thought it was amazing. Obviously there's the draw of dogs being involved, which is just incredible.
And I think I've had the easiest job as a scientist to be able to do recruitment for a project ever, just by sending out an email with pictures of dogs, explaining that we want some samples of their breath to present to dogs. But this is probably not something that's going to be the end point. We wouldn't necessarily start yet treatment based on the back of this sort of test. But really it's about improving our screening of young patients who can't produce sputum, so that we are able to target further investigations to them.
When I was diagnosed, it was kind of too late. It was already chronic, so if I'd been diagnosed earlier, it might have been eradicated, and any lung damage that I have would have been prevented. And the earlier things like this are picked up, the better. Absolutely
is a partnership between trainer and dog. There are some partnerships work better than others just because of that sort of magic stuff that you sometimes have between yourself and a dog. Certainly when it's there, it makes our work that much more successful.
I was originally called the Mad Dog Lady, and I think perhaps I'll never lose that label. But I have a huge belief in the difference that dogs can make to humans, and the wonderful relationship we have with each other, and what that can teach in the future.